What's going on YouTube? My name's Garrity. Today we're talking about the Sony A7 Mark II in 2020 and why you should pick one up. Let's go.
Yeah.
Guys, just to make sure you're in the right spot, this is the A7 Mark II, not the 3, the 2. This is the one that came out in 2014. It shares a lot of the same qualities as the A7 Mark III, but there's some major differences, and we're going to dive into why you should be picking one up in 2020, whether you're a beginner photographer, looking for a full frame, whatever the deal might be. Let's just talk about the Mark II. Now, before we dive into why you should be picking up the A7 Mark II, I just kind of want to introduce myself if you're new around here. My name's Garrity. I like to do these reviews from photographer to photographer talk, where I kind of just give you a more of a realistic approach of how a talk would go down with another photographer. I find a lot of these YouTube videos, they kind of read off Google, they kind of just read off the slide of the spec sheet. And in real life, when you're talking to another photographer and you're interested in their camera, their lenses, that really doesn't happen. They're not listing the weight of their camera. They're not listing the specs down to the actual point, the decimal point. That's just something you guys can do on your own research. I'm just here to tell you real world scenarios about lenses and cameras and how I personally fit them into my day-to-day shoots and why you should maybe think about looking into one too. So if you guys kind of like that stuff, think about subscribing and definitely like this video if this is going to help you out. So that goes a long way. A7 Mark II. Why you should be picking them up is there's several reasons why, and this, again, I don't know your background, so you guys might be a beginner photographer looking for your first full frame. You might be interested in the A7 Mark III right now. There's a bunch of cool, really nice mirrorless cameras in general, and if you want to step into the Sony world, it can be kind of daunting. There's the A6500s, all the way to the Alpha series, the A7s, the Mark IIs, the Mark IIIs, the Rs, the S's. It kind of gets a little confusing if you're just diving in. So I want to talk about this one specifically. I think this would make a good first step into a full frame mirrorless camera for either a beginner photographer, amateur, and even a professional, even nowadays, can get away using this camera. So to introduce the Alpha Series to you, the A7s, and just kind of break down what they're kind of going for, and you might make a better understanding. Each class, the A7S, the Mark II, and the R, have specific roles on what they're trying to fill. Now, both of them do photo and video. All of them do photo and video. But there's specific things that they're trying to hit on why you would pick up that certain one. So, for example, the A7S, that one is meant for video. Now, it's for videographers. It's better in low light. It's 12 megapixel. There's a lot of good things, characteristics that make it a great video camera, video mirrorless DSLR. Now again, it can do photos, but that's not the point of the A7S. Its goal is for video and videographers. Now the Mark II, which is right here, what you're looking at right here, that's kind of like the jack of all trades. It's not great at photos and it's not great at video compared to these other two. Now it can do both, but it doesn't excel at either. Do you know what I mean? So the R, obviously, is what we're left with, is for photos. It has a higher megapixel rate than all of them, and on top of that, it's meant for photos. Again, it can do video, but that higher megapixel sensor is meant for prints and photos in general to get you a higher quality image. Now again, all three of them are great, solid cameras, and they share a lot of the same characteristics, but they have certain points that they excel at. And this one, the Mark II A7, this one is kind of the jack of all trades, the in-between of the two. And the good point about it, it's also the cheapest out of the two. So if you are looking to do photo and video, you're kind of dabbling in both, this is a great one to pick up because you kind of get the best of both worlds. Now, there's certain things you might miss out on, so we're going to dive into that too. But let's just talk about the pros of this thing off the first place. You're getting a 24 megapixel camera, a sensor. Now that's a solid, kind of almost like a go-to nowadays for DSLRs. It's coming in at the price point of just under $1,000 for the body, I believe off Amazon. I'll post a link in the description so you can check that out yourself. Now the beauty of you saving that money, again, that might be a lot for some people, so I'm not saying that that's not cheap, but for Sony full frames, that is on the cheaper side. Now, with you saving that money on the top end, a little under $1,000 for this full frame, you can use that money to buy other glass for the camera itself. Maybe even pick up an 85, whatever it might be. Whatever your budget allows or what you're looking into, you can kind of save that money instead of shelling out for the Mark III, for the S2, the R2, R3, R4, whatever it is you're looking at. This is the cheapest full frame for the Sonys. And again, you could save that extra money and put it towards glass, because that's where, again, that's not any cheaper. Glass is no cheaper. So any money you can save kind of helps out in the long run, is kind of how I see it. So one thing that the S, the Mark II, and the R all share is the 5-axis stabilization. Now, the Mark IIs in general was the first step for Sony to make the 5-axis stabilization in the body. Before that, you would find it in just the lenses. Now, when you have just the body of stabilization in here, and you have a lens that's not, so this 85 millimeter, if I have this on here, this doesn't have any stabilization in it. But luckily, the body itself does. So those little micro movements you might make with your hands if you're shooting video, handheld, or even photos, it kind of helps steady it out. And it's subtle, but it definitely helps steady it out. On top of that, if you had stabilization in your actual lens and you paired that with something like the A7 Mark II, which has stabilization in the body, then you can get really smooth footage even on it, not even without a gimbal. You can do some handheld, real subtle movements, and it'll kind of get rid of those shakes in your hands, those subtle shakes that you might not notice until you go back and process it later and find out, wow, all my shots are really shaky. That's not a good thing to come back and see, and this camera will actually help eliminate that. Now again, the S2 does it, the R2 does it, and so does the A7 Mark II. They share some characteristics, and that's a major one. That another reason why I'd say pick up the A7 Mark II if you're looking to do that kind of stuff and have that extra stabilization in the body, which is huge. The Mark II, if you guys are looking at the Mark IIIs, you guys know that the big selling point is the eye autofocus. The Mark IIs, they do have eye autofocus. It's just not continuous eye autofocus. So what that means is when you're in continuous autofocus mode on these cameras, it's not going to lock onto the eye the whole time. Now with the Mark IIIs, the R3s, anything that and above, they have it so when you're moving around, it'll lock onto my eye and it'll be able to stay with it and keep that autofocus. This will not do it continuously. You have to set the eye autofocus each time when you're taking the photo. So it's still going to be a huge asset to you if you're shooting, let's just say, a wedding. It'll still lock onto the bride or the groom's eye and you're snapping photos. It just won't do it continuously if you're constantly shooting video and you want it to lock on their eye and move around. It won't lock onto their eye. It's going to lock onto their whole face is what it's going to do. Now, that might be a con to some people. It might not matter to you. I just want it to be known out there that that is something that this camera doesn't do, is the continuous eye. It still does it. Still does eye autofocus, just doesn't do it continuously. So let's talk about just some photos in general. My camera is not in the prettiest of conditions. I use my cameras a lot. Sometimes accidents happen. It's traveled all around the States with me. So it has a little ding on top. It fell off the back of a motorcycle. It has some little marks here and there from just, I used to do a lot of tours with this thing. So again, it's taken a beating, but I kind of love that about it, is it has its own story now, and I have stories I can tell with it. One thing to note is with these Sony A7 Mark II specifically, or the Mark IIs in general, you'll notice that the screens start fading on the side. Now that's nothing to stress about because it's actually a screen protector on top that you can flip up, and if you get like a razor blade, you can pick it up and replace it. I replaced mine for $12. I just kind of want it to be known because there is sometimes when people are buying used A7s and they're looking at it and they're like, oh my God, the back of the screen is so scratched up, and it's actually not. It's not their fault at all. It's known for the actual glue adhesive to give away over time, and it's not a big deal. It's like $12 on Amazon. You just razor blade, pick it up, then you can slap on a new one and good to go, brand spanking new looking LCD screen. That was just something just from one A7 Mark II user to another. Don't freak out if you see that. Don't let it deter you. Definitely check it out. Make sure it still works and everything like that. But it's an easy fix. I was nervous when it happened because I was like, I do baby this thing. Even though it has some dings, It's in a padded backpack. And I'm like, how did it get so scratched up? I don't understand. And again, it's not my fault either. It's the glue adhesive given away slowly over time, that if you just get that new one, like I said, the replacement, slap it on, you're good to go. So the photos out of this thing are amazing. If you're worried about, the R is really good for prints and really good for photos in general. You know what? One sec. All right, I kind of just wanted to show this to show you can still take really cool prints and you can print them out. This is a 20 by 30 frame, and hopefully you could see the clarity and everything and how it kept all the quality of the photo and was able to print it out beautifully. So don't let, just because it's not an R, so you're worried about the photos not being killer. You can take killer photos, print them out, full 20 by 30 picture. I can definitely go bigger with it too. I'm just trying to show you an example. This is one I had here. Okay, I just kind of wanted to show that one just because I had it off to the side. I had someone talking to me on the side before, one of my friends, and he was kind of worried about, well, it's not the R, and he really wants to take prints with it, and so maybe he wanted to lean towards that. And again, if you are solely doing photos and you want to take full quality prints, I don't blame you at all for going to the R, but budget always comes into play, and I kind of just wanted to show him you can still take killer photos and get some great quality prints that you wouldn't even notice the megapixel problem at all. 24 is plenty to do these kind of prints. I just didn't want to deter you away from it thinking that you can't do full quality prints if that's what you're into, or what your photo side of it. I've taken hundreds and thousands of photos on this thing with for weddings, for just prints alone like that, for you name it. I've done so much photos with this thing that not once was the megapixel count ever an issue, ever. So let's talk about video and compare it to the A7S Mark II now. The A7S Mark II is based for video. That's what it excels at. And the difference between these two is the S2 is doing 4K. And same with the A7 Mark III, it's shooting 4K. So that's a big argument about the Mark IIs is, well, why am I going to pick this up in 2020 if I'm not shooting in 4K with it? Why would I even bother? 1080p HD is still great quality. Not once have I given a client their video and then have they been like, wow, this isn't 4K? No, they watch the video and they see how clean it looks and everything, and that's what they're worried about, is if it looks good. Now, so my point is, when you're picking up this for video, I want you to focus more on your shots itself, your composition, your editing, everything that goes into video, and not focus solely just that it's 4K. Just because you have a 4K camera doesn't make the video look amazing just out of the gate. You have to still work on actually using the lenses, working on your composition, work on your storytelling, whatever you're doing, focus more on that. So that's more for the beginning photographers that are looking into the full frame, that are trying to be like, well, the A7 Mark III does 4K. And again, yes, I understand that your worry is that the 4K down the line. You could still make killer 1080p videos. They're still being released in 2020 now, and no one bats an eye at it. As long as it's good filming, good movement, everything that goes into video editing, all of that, if that's all good, no one's going to question the fact that it's only 1080p. It doesn't make you a good videographer just because you shot in 4K. That's my point. And I hope that came through okay. I hope that kind of made sense. If you're at the point now where you have the Mark II and you're kind of capped out, you're like, Garrity, I've been shooting, I know what I'm doing, my clients are all happy with my footage, but I kind of want that extra 4K, so it kind of gives me some breathing room if I want to crop it in to make it a 1080p, or you just want that 4K quality now, then all the power to you. If this is limiting you and you want to get that extra 4K footage, then maybe you look into the S2, or you look at the A7 Mark III, or you look at other options like that. But for budget photographers, for someone just diving into full frames, Sony's, and they want that nice balance of video and photos, this is no exception right there. It's going to do the job that you need it to do. Again, the top thing it can do is 60 frames per second in 1080p. But that being said, it does 24 frames, it does 30. So a lot of the videos I shot were in 24 frames per second, 1080p. So all in all, guys, if I'm comparing this to, let's just say the Mark IIIs, the R3s, something a little bit higher, something released sooner. Some minor differences are the handle itself might feel a little different to you. Your pinky will still hang off Mark IIs, Mark IIIs. Well, for me, at least it does. The button placement might be a little bit different. There's a joystick on the Mark IIIs, the Rs. But this thing, there's still plenty of customization. It's not as daunting as the Mark IIIs and the R3s and whatever else could come. There's like pages on pages of the menu screen, which can be a lot for people. I remember my buddy who just bought a Mark III, he just came from Canon, and he was so flustered by the amount of pages. We sat down for like an hour or so just kind of going through everything. The nice thing about the Mark II is it still has a good amount of pages, not nearly the amount as the Mark III. So you have plenty of customization in here. You can do whatever you need to do, customize the buttons, whatever it is. You get plenty of customization, but I don't find it as overwhelming as the Mark IIIs and the R3s. So that's just one thing. This is not a pro nor a con. It's kind of like a, I don't even know what to call that, but it's just something to note. It's not as daunting. So I think this is a great step up for the beginner photographer, amateur photographer, even a professional, depending on what you were shooting on. I don't think this is a step back at all. I think there might be the right move for some people. I still use it to this day. Even though I have an R3, I'm still using this all the time. There's no different. You won't even be able to tell sometimes when I take these photos, is that your Mark II? Is it your R3? It's still a professional mirrorless DSLR. I consider it. What do I know? This is just from one photographer to another. This is just how I feel about it. So if you guys have some examples, how do you guys feel about the Mark II in 2020? I'm still using it. I would still use it maybe even past 2020. So what do you guys think about it? Are you still using it? Are you going to pick one up? Is the price point still a little too high for you? Are you looking at other cameras? Let me know what you guys are doing nowadays, and I'd love to hear and talk to you guys more, okay? Check out some of my other videos. I just did a Canon 5D right there. I just did a review on that in 2020. I'm still using that. So compare those two. Maybe I'll do a shoot off between those. Let me know if that's something you guys are interested in too. Again, like and subscribe, guys. It goes a long way for me. I hope I can keep getting better for you, and I'll see you guys next time, okay? Thank you.